This is just a precursor to the video. There may be dogs barking or jingling of key tags, and I do apologize. I'm trying to work on this in my free time as I'm both in school and working, and it seems like whenever I try to record a video is when the dogs start barking, as they are now. So if you can't hear them now, then hopefully you can't hear them in the video. I just wanted to put that out there and apologize in advance. Hello, and thank you for turning into Curious Cat Crime Sunday. This is Shelby, and today's episode is going to be on the Green River Killer, otherwise known as Gary Ridgway. Thank you for turning in. Please hit subscribe, and remember to hit that bell button so you don't miss another episode. This case took place in both Tacoma, Washington and Seattle, Washington. Tacoma, Washington is a port city. It is situated along Washington's Puget Sounds, 32 miles or 51 kilometers southwest of Seattle, and 31 miles or 50 kilometers northeast of the state capital, Olympia. Some interesting facts about Seattle, Washington. Washington is one of America's most well-educated cities. It is also one of the most literate. There's another little fact here. It says Seattle's most photographed object is the Space Needle. I myself have actually been in it and got to go to the top. And the view, let me tell you, if you have a chance to go there, definitely go up and take a look at that view. It's very, very beautiful. A little bit of information I found was about Washington in general. In the 90s, the population of Washington's state aged 3 years and over was 4,649,208 people. Of this total, 1,252, 312, which is 27%, were enrolled in school, ranging from preschool to college and graduate courses, and 3,396,936, which is 73%, were not enrolled in any educational programs. Overall, 79% of all Washington residents 15 years and older had earned at least a high school degree, and 19.7% had earned a bachelor's degree or higher. The Green River Killer was born Gary Leon Ridgway on February 18, 1949 in Salt Lake City, Utah, the second child of three to Mary and Thomas Ridgway. They were all three sons. His home life was somewhat troubled, as relatives have described his mother as domineering and have said that while young he witnessed more than one violent argument between his parents. His father was a bus driver who would often complain about the presence of professional street workers. Ridgway had been a bedwetting problem until he was 13, and his mother would wash his private areas after every episode. He would later tell a defense psychologist that in adolescence he had conflicting feelings of anger and blankual attraction towards his mother and fantasized about killing her. Ridgway graduated Thai High School in 1969 and married his 19-year-old high school girlfriend, Claudia Craig. He joined the United States Navy and was sent to Vietnam, where he served on board a supply ship and saw combat. During his time in the military, Ridgway had frequent relations with professional street workers and contracted an STD. Although angered by this, he continued this activity without protection. The marriage ended within a year. When questioned about after Ridgway's arrest, friends described him as friendly but strange. His first two marriages ended in divorce because of the infidelities by both partners. His second wife, Marcia Winslow, claimed that he had placed her in a chokehold. He became religious during his second marriage and began reading the Bible aloud at work and at home, insisting that his wife follow the strict teachings of his pastor. Ridgway would also frequently cry after sermons or reading the Bible. Despite his belief, Ridgway continued to solicit the service of professional street workers and wanted his wife to participate in relations in public and inappropriate places, sometimes even in areas where his victims' bodies were later discovered. According to the women in his life, Ridgway had an insatiable relationable appetite. His 3 ex-wives and several ex-girlfriends reported that he demanded relations from them several times a day. Often he would want to have relations in a public area or in the woods. Ridgway himself admitted to having a fixation with professional street workers with whom he had a love-hate relationship. He frequently complained about their presence in the neighborhood, but he also took advantage of their services regularly. In a statement read at his plea hearing, Ridgway said he hated professional street workers and didn't want to pay them for relations. Some have speculated that Ridgway was torn between his lusts and his staunch religious belief. His second son, on a side note, Marcia, had a son with Ridgway. His name was Matthew, and he was born in 1975. Throughout the 1980s and 1990s, Ridgway is believed to have murdered at least 71 teenage girls and women near Seattle and Tacoma, Washington. In court statements, Ridgway later reported that he had killed so many that he had lost count. A majority of the murders occurred between 1982 and 1984. The victims were believed to either be professional street workers or runaways, whom he picked up along the Pacific Highway South. Ridgway sometimes showed the women a picture of his son and tricked them into trusting him. They would engage in relations, and after a minute, from behind, Ridgway would wrap his forearm around the front of their necks and the other arm to pull back as tightly as he could, strangling them. He killed most of his victims in his home, his truck, or a secluded area. Most of their bodies were dumped in the wood around the Green River, hence the name, or somewhere in Seattle, Tacoma International Airport, and other dumping sites along the South King County. There were also 2 confirmed and another 2 suspected victims found in Portland, Oregon area. The bodies were often left in clusters, sometimes posed, usually nude. He would sometimes return to the victim's body and have relations with them. Ridgway later explained that he did not find necrophilia more satisfying, but having relations with the deceased reduced his need to obtain a living victim and thus limiting his exposure to being caught. Because most of the bodies were not discovered until only the skeletons remained, 2 victims are still unidentified. Ridgway occasionally contaminated the dump sites with gum, cigarettes, and written material belonging to others, and he even transported a few victims across state lines into Oregon to confuse police. In the early 1980s, the King County Sheriff's Office formed a Green River task force to investigate the murders. The task force members included Robert Capel and Dave Reichert, who periodically interviewed incarcerated serial killer Ted Bundy in 1984. Bundy offered his opinion on the psychological motivations and behavior of the killer. He suggested that the killer was revisiting dump sites to have relations with the victims, which turned out to be true, and if police found a fresh grave, they should stake it out and wait for him to come back. As contributing to investigations was FBI agent John E. Douglas, who developed a profile on the suspect. Ridgway was arrested in 1982 and 2001 on charges related to professional street working. He became a suspect in the Green River killings in 1983, and in 1984, Ridgway passed a polygraph test. On April 7, 1987, police took hair and saliva samples from Ridgway. Around 1985, Ridgway was dating Judith Mawson, who became his 3rd wife in 1988. Mawson claimed in a 2010 television interview that when she moved into the house while they were dating, there was no carpet. The detectives later told her he had probably wrapped the body in a carpet. In the same interview, she described how he would leave work early in the morning most days, ostensibly for the overtime pay. Mawson speculated that he must have committed some of the murders while supposedly working in the early morning shifts. She claimed that she had not suspected Ridgway's crimes before she was contacted by authorities in 1987, and had not even heard of the Green River Killer before the time she did not watch the news. Author Penny Moorhead interviewed Ridgway in prison And he said while he was in a relationship with Mawson, his kill rate went down, and that he truly loved her. Of the 49 known victims, only 3 were killed after he married Mawson. Mawson told a local television reporter, "I feel I have saved lives by being his wife and making him happy." The samples collected in 1987 were later subjected to DNA profiling, providing the evidence for his arrest warrant. On November 30th, 2001, Ridgway was at Kentworth Truck Factory, where he worked as a spray painter, when police arrived to arrest him. Ridgway was arrested on suspicion of murdering 4 women nearly 20 years earlier, after first being identified as a potential suspect. He was identified, I learned this in a show, I forget which one it was, but it had to do with his third wife, and she was explaining the story of her relationship with him, and it also explained the story of the Green River Killer. This is what I based my PowerPoint presentation on for one of my forensics classes on the Green River Killer, is that he was suspected because he was often found at the places where the professional street workers that had died were working typically, and had been pulled over a few times for that, as read above about how he was arrested in 1982 and 2001 on charges related to professional street work. This was from that time. So going on, Ridgway was arrested on suspicion of murdering 4 women nearly 20 years after first being identified as a potential suspect, when DNA evidence conclusively linked male excretion left in the victim to the saliva swab taken by police. The 4 victims named in the original indictment were Marcia Chapman, Opal Mills, Cynthia Hines, and Carol Ann Christensen. 3 more victims, Wendy Caulfield, Deborah Bonner, and Deborah Estes, and please, if I said any of these wrongs, I'm terribly sorry, were added to the indictment after the forensic scientists identified microscopic spray paint spheres as a specific brand and composition of paint used by Kentworth factory during the specific time frame of these victims were killed. Now on to the plea bargain, confession, and sentencing stage of our show. Early in August 2003, Seattle television news reported that Ridgway had been moved from a maximum security cell at King County Jail to an airway height minimum medium security level tank. Other news reports stated that his lawyer, led by Anthony Savage, were closing a plea bargain that would spare the death penalty in return for his confession to the number of Green River killings. On November 5th, 2003, Ridgway pled guilty to 48 charges of aggravated first-degree murder as part of the plea bargain, agreed in June that would spare him execution in exchange for his cooperation in locating the remains of the victims and providing other details. He is now 70 at the time of this recording. In his statement accompanying his his guilty plea, Ridgway explained that he had killed all of his victims inside King County, Washington, and that he had transported and dumped the remains of 2 women near Portland to confuse police. Deputy Prosecutor Jeffrey Barrett noted in court the deal contained the names of 41 victims who would not be the subject of State v. Ridgway if it were not for the plea agreement. King County prosecuting attorney Norm Milling explained his decision to make the deal as such. "We could have gone forward with 7 counts, but that is all we could have hoped to solve. At the end of the trial, whatever the outcome, there would have been lingering doubts about the rest of these crimes. This agreement was the avenue of truth, and in the end, the search for truth is still why we have the criminal justice system. Gary Ridgway did not deserve our mercy. He does not deserve to live. The mercy provided by today's resolution is directed not at Ridgway, but towards the families that have suffered so much." On December 18, 2003, King County Superior Court Judge Richard Jones sentenced Ridgway to 48 life sentence without the possibility of parole to be served consecutively. He was also sentenced to an additional 10 years for tampering with evidence for each of the 48 victims, adding 480 years to his 48 life sentences. Later, he was given another life sentence after the remains of a 49th victim were found. Ridgway led prosecutors to 3 bodies in 2003. On August 16th of that year, the remains of the 16-year-old girl found near Enumclaw, Washington, 40 feet from State Road 410, were pronounced as belonging to Pammy Annette Advent, who was believed to be the victim of the Green River Killer. The remains of Marie Malvar and April Broughton were found in September 2003. On November 23, 2005, the Associated Press reported that a weekend hiker found a skull of one of the 48 women Ridgway admitted murdering in his 2003 plea bargain with Kings County prosecutors. The skull of another victim, Tracy Winston, who was only 19 when she disappeared from Northgate Mall on September 12, 1983, was found on November 20, 2005 by a man hiking in a wooded area near Highway 18 in Issaquah. I definitely said that wrong. I apologize. Southeast of Seattle. This was the find that led to Ridgway's 49th life sentence. Ridgway confessed to more confirmed murders than any other American serial killer. Over a period of 5 months of police and prosecuting interviews, he confessed to 48 murders, 42 of which were on the police's list of probable Green River Killer victims. On February 9, 2004, going back a little bit, county prosecutors began to release the videotape records of Ridgway's confession. In one taped interview, he initially told investigators that he was responsible for the death of 65 women. In another taped interview with Reichart on December 31, 2003, Ridgway claimed to have murdered 71 victims and confessed to having relations with them before killing them, a detail which he did not reveal until after sentencing. In his confession, he acknowledged that he targeted professional street workers because they were easy to pick up and that he hated most of them. He confessed that he had relations with his victims' bodies after he murdered them, but claimed he began burying the later victims so that he could resist the urge to commit necrophilia. Ridgway later said that murdering young women was his career. Incarceration. Ridgway was placed in solitary confinement at Washington State Penitentiary in Walla Walla in January 2004. On May 14, 2015, he was transferred to USP Florence High, a high-security federal prison east of Cannon City, Colorado. In September 2015, after the public outcry and discussion with Governor Jay Inslee, Corrections Secretary Bernie Warner announced that Ridgway would be transferred back to Washington to be easily accessible for open murder investigations. Ridgway was returned by charter plane to Washington State Penitentiary in Walla Walla from USP Florence High on October 24, 2015. As for his victims, before Ridgway's confession, authorities had contributed 49 murders to the Green River Killer. Ridgway confessed to murdering at least 71 victims. Ridgway's victims were not of any specific race or ethnicity. Rather, they were all financially poor, and except for 3 of them were all young women. Girls between the age of 14 and 26, whom he found to be vulnerable circumstances, often working as professional street workers or having run away from home. At the time of Ridgway's December 18, 2003 sentencing, authorities had been able to find at least 48 sets of remains, including victims not originally attributed to the Green River Killer. Ridgway was sentenced for the deaths of these 48 women, and with the plea bargain that he would plead guilty to any and all further cases in King County where his confession could be corroborated by reliable evidence. This has been another case with Shelby and Olivia. Thank you so much for watching Curious Cat Crime Sunday, and I hope you have a great week. Come back next week for a new episode, Sunday at noon Eastern Time. Hey guys, Shelby here. So I just wanted to let you know I did a project about Gary Ridgway in forensic science, I want to say the class was. And I was trying to find my PowerPoint, and for the life of me, I just cannot. And I was going to put on this video, and I think it would have been really great because I did a whole entire project, all research on his home life, on his murders, but I cannot find it. So if I do find it in the future, I'll make a short video and I'll upload it. I'm working with my teacher right now to try to find it. So hopefully we can find it and put it up at some point. All right. Well, thank you again for stopping by and watching, and I hope you guys have a great day. Bye.